we have for you a couple of minor changes, small additions, and one, as I find, very big addition to one of our modules, which I'm very excited about to show you. It's brand new, and I think it will really improve the user experience for certain projects, especially those where you're working with coordinated corridors. But more of that later. We will first start with, yeah, I would say minor changes or small improvements of life. I will therefore change to my first screen here. First of all, Lisa 7.3, as you might have noticed, it's just it's an update, not like a step. Lisa 7, Lisa 8, more of an update and an addition of some quality of life changes. We will start with the, let's say, with the least exciting, and then go on to the big thing where I really think this will be very interesting for most of you. First of all, going into the basic data, an additional option that we have added here is for the intersection points, and this is intersection points between crossings and travel paths, meaning that we also here have now the possibility to go for the travel path boundaries here, because that was a problem with certain, let me just zoom in, with certain certain regulations in some countries. So these intersection points between travel paths and the crossings, they were not found in former versions, and now we have this new option here. So for certain specific roadside manuals or rules and regulations in certain countries, this is an important new feature. Also, when we are looking here at the basic data, maybe I change back to this way of doing it. As you might know, as of Lisa 7, we are capable of exporting the topology of the intersection. So all this data you see here, the lane data, the travel path data, we export this in the MapX format, the format used to deploy data to roadside units. And as part of this, we are now also capable of giving numbers to pedestrian crossings. As you can see here now, in the past, they were numbered by the leg that they are crossing, and now we have the additional possibility to just give them their own number so they can be identified by this number. This is the number 1, and we can also see this if we're opening the intersection diagram. In the crossings, you have now a number. The way of numbering them is up to you. In this case, we have a crossing number 1 in every leg. It would also be possible to give them numbers according to their leg, or just starting to number them at the first leg and then go around the intersection. I could also give it, I don't know, any number I want to, and then it will show up here in the intersection diagram. So an additional way of numbering or identification of intersection crossings. So where do we see these crossings? Also the name you're giving here when we change over to our signal timing plan view. That is the next step where we did some changes. If you have a look at the evaluation of the capacity of our intersection here. We'll see when opening this window. I have to take it over here. That in the pedestrian traffic, we now have these crossing numbers here as an identification of the crossing. So a more detailed way of telling individual crossings apart, because it could happen in the past that you would have several crossings in the same leg with the same signal group, and then it might have been hard to identify which one is which. So here we have now this number showing up. Another, let's say, quality of life improvement with the introduction of LISA 7.2, we moved the properties section of the signal timing plan editor here to the right. So it is permanent. It permanently shows the properties of the signal timing plans. In case you are not happy with this taking up real estate on your screen and you were wondering, is there no possibility of getting rid of it at all? Because what you can do now is you can put it here to the right, but it will still stick here and stick around and still be visible. If you want to have a clean view on your graphics and don't care about all this data that we are displaying here. Additionally, there is now a new button here, which is the window layout, where you can get rid of the properties window 100% and just have the clean view on the signal timing plan as it was before LISA 7.2. If you want to check the properties again, you can show them here again. And the Explorer as well is also bound to this this button. So if I wanted, I could get rid of all the other stuff and just concentrate on editing my signal timing plan if I really don't have the space on my monitor for some reason. Also, minor change that we find here in the parameter section, we can now not only directly change between a flow that was, I think, a new feature in LISA 7.2 that you could, without opening the properties and going deep into the evaluation panel, to directly change the flow. This evaluation is based on for this plan. Let me remind you, if I mark it, I have to open the quality of flow here first. Let's just do that really quick so we know what we're talking about. I go to the visible columns and I show you the saturation flow and the level of service. So level of service was the word I was searching for. So as soon as we are displaying the level of service, it is also displayed graphically inside our intersection diagram. So this level of service is always based on two things. First of all, it's based on a flow that we entered in the evaluation data. I can change this flow here with the click of a button by choosing another one. And now you're seeing that the quality here is changed. If I go to the afternoon, you also see a slight change in the level of service. And the other thing that I can now do without going deep into the menus is changing to a different evaluation method where we also might end up with a totally different level of service. So this is the method of 2001, method of 2015, and we see the changes at the click of a button. So you might argue nothing really new here, some quality of life improvements here and there, something that I can now show directly, open up and down, maybe one more thing of this. And then we come to the big thing, to the new feature that I think our development team can be really proud of, which is the new coordination evaluation. Before we come to that, just to tick all the boxes of all the other minor changes, when we go to the logic editor, those advanced users among you who are actually using so-called AP value blocks, which means you are sending, you are able to send any variable, for example, this ATT, additional travel time, if I change the group of this variable to any value bigger than 0, it gets an assigned OITD number. This means that with this value is sent to the traffic central under this address, OITD number 61111.1. And if I have another variable RTT, which I want to send, then it gets the OITD address 1.61.111.2. The caveat here is when you're doing that, as soon as we are changing the order of our variables, you might notice that the OITD address is changing, and that is by design. We could not do anything about it. So what we're going to do now to avoid this, because maybe you're not even aware of this problem, you are rearranging your variables here, and then you've changed the this order. What you can do is you can now right click and lock the sequence, meaning that there is no rearranging of the variables anymore by name or sorting by data type or whatever, saving your current OITD number configuration. Okay. So far, so niche. Let's have a look at the big one. The new coordination module. Let me open this for you. First of all, maybe a short explanation or a short look back at what could and what could not do our coordination view. So we have here time distance diagram. If you're familiar with Lisa, what we did here, we opened 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, no, 6 intersections, and we have selected the main direction for each of them, and their green time is displayed here. And also we are able to display with this green time where would the first and the last car actually arrive at the following intersection. So in itself, a nice tool to plan a coordinated corridor, because we can see that here we have some, we have this kind of corridor within where we know a car that starts here will come to the last intersection without stopping. We can even, and could even, and for years we could do this, help us by displaying what we called this green band and fill it with a certain pattern. If we display it, this would simply show us in which part of our green time of the first intersection is it possible to get to the last intersection without stopping. So, and if we do some editing in between, like moving around the offset of this intersection, we would see how this green band would eventually become smaller until it's not there anymore. So this was, let's say, the most sophisticated way of telling if a green band is capable of, or if it's a nice coordination or not. What this did not take into account, or only if you would really display also these kind of graphics for secondary directions, what is happening with those cars that come into the intersection? What is happening with cars? How big is actually the platoon? How is the density at the beginning of the green, at the end of the green? And that is the new thing that we have implemented here, and that we are basing our new coordination optimization and evaluation on. Let me first get rid of this so helpful but not really new way of displaying. So instead of just displaying what's happening in the main direction, which we can still do, let me open the evaluation of the coordination. So what we have done already in LISA 7 is we were showing the performance index, as we call it. So we could say this when we take into account all the stops that happen in the network, also with the cars coming into the from the turning into the coordination from secondary directions somewhere here, taking all of this into account, we are reaching, or we are coming to a performance index, which is a representation of how many stops are there in the network, how much fuel is actually used for stopping, for accelerating and stuff. But we could not really display what was happening behind, or what were the considerations that Lisa was taking in the back. And that was because we could not visualize the platoons. And now we have this new button over here, which in my eyes is really sensational. When you click on it, it will display now the platoon and the density of the platoon starting at the first intersection. You can see here now, if we go a bit more inside, maybe it's easier to spot that there is Lisa is now making a difference between how dense is traffic actually. We can, for the first intersection, or for the whole thing, first of all, we can decide in the direction of travel. How is the arrival at the first intersection? Is it a uniform arrival during the cycle time, which means all over the cycle times, there's a kind of equal distribution between vehicles, which means that at the beginning of green, there will be a slightly denser, slightly more density, because all the cars that arrive during the red time will kind of, form the platoon here. We also see how the density of this platoon is diminishing over the course of the coordination. That is due to the fact that also some of the cars that reach that arrive at this intersection are actually turning to the right, turning to the left. They are not part of the platoon anymore. So this is also taken into consideration. And now maybe you are asking, why do we have this platoon here starting at this intersection? This platoon is actually formed by those cars who are waiting, but they're not coming from this. They're not coming from this direction. And this is the really helpful thing. We can also display platoons in additional directions, meaning these are the platoons of signal groups that are turning into our coordinated corridor. And when we now display also the wait times, I'm not displaying right now the opposite direction, because then you see it gets rather crowded here in the diagram. But what you see right here now, you have from the first intersection the platoon that is formed by the cars that wait during red. You have also the second platoon, which are the turning vehicles that come into the that turn into our main direction from the secondary direction. They are waiting here at the second intersection for the green time. Then they start. The platoon here is reaching this point. Why is it not reaching this point? Because there is already a number of cars coming from the secondary direction of this intersection. So they are, with their density, waiting until this point, until they can move together with this third platoon that comes out of this secondary direction. And the two secondary directions have in consequence formed, I will go on here because that's the same, have in consequence formed a platoon that is coming together with the main flow and is even stronger in density already at this intersection than the actual main platoon that is coming from the first intersection. So we have seen in the past from the algorithms that we were using for the optimization of our coordinations, some results that we could not really explain, or that we were sometimes not really convinced of, because when you are not able to display all these flows and the density of these flows, by the way, I'm always talking about density just to show you that when I click on um, one of these platoons here, then you see here the properties. How many vehicles is this per hour? When's the departure, the arrival, and you have, is it details? Traffic density, vehicles per kilometer. So here we have in the first part 40 vehicles per kilometer. Here we have 33.7 vehicles per kilometer. Down here 25, up here 38. They form together a broader platoon with a density of 28.8. So, but having this information, additional information, where does a platoon form? When does it start? Where does it arrive? It is for us much more understandable, the results that Lisa is giving us at certain points. So here, for example, we have green time here, but we still have to wait. Why is that? Because we have vehicles waiting there already. So of course, when you want to use this level of detail, we have to give a little bit of more information. So you see here, we have this new property section where, the property section was there before, but we have a bit more information that we have to give for Lisa to work with. First of all, as I said, where is the platoon arriving? We can also change to a uniform arrival during green time. And as you see right now, the density of the platoon is instantly changing to something that is constant over the whole green time at the first intersection. We could also change it to something uniform arrival during red time. So now the density at the beginning is even bigger. So everyone is arriving during red. They are all trying to get away from here as fast as possible. And at the end of the green time, there's virtually no traffic at all anymore. We could assume that there's a platoon at the beginning of green because we maybe know that they are arriving in a coordinated way, which doesn't really change something in the densities here. Or we can say there's a platoon at the end of green. So now everything has moved to the end, and we are, it's much easier to analyze where do I have what I really need, where do I have space on the road. So that is what these densities are giving us, a way to tell where do I actually have space to put more vehicles? Where should I coordinate a certain signal group so I can assume that there's no platoon right now going through? So I think this is a very helpful tool, and we are only starting to delve into all the opportunities that it will give us in optimizing our coordinated controls. For me, it has always been a very, very difficult task, and one that I would rather leave to my colleagues, because I just could not make sense of what was going on behind the scenes, and maybe it was a lack of imagination on where the cars were. So when you see it like this, I think it's a very, very helpful way of getting around these problems that you're facing when planning it. So maybe we go back to the uniform arrival during cycle time. So you see we have a rather uniform density here and a higher density here, taking into account the vehicles starting before. What else we are able to show is to include or not include the yellow time into our considerations. Shall we assume that it's used like green time or not? Evaluate incoming traffic. Opposing direction, of course, the same thing. And now if we go to the individual intersection, So this was for the whole let's say coordination, where we have to say what's happening at the beginning of the of a coordinated corridor, and for the inflows during the corridor, let's take this intersection, the information we have to give, which signal group is it that is turning in here. So we are basically selecting the green time to calculate these other platoons that come from the secondary directions. And there we also have to give the information. Is it a protective turn or is it a permissive turn? Why do we give this information? Imagine a flow coming into the turning into your main direction from the secondary one. If they have their own signal, most of the cars will enter the corridor at the beginning of the green time of the signal group. If they don't have their own signal group, and there may be a left turner who has to wait until oncoming traffic from the opposite direction has cleared the intersection so they can turn left into a coordinated corridor, we can expect that most of the traffic, most of the platoon will form at the end of this green time of this particular intersection. It might be worth to make another slide for this or draw a picture. I hope you could follow what I was trying to convey here about the permissive turn, protective turn. Actually, yeah, where do we expect the cars to come? At the beginning of green or at the end of green of our secondary direction signal group? So this is the information we give here. And yeah, then all we have to do is just decide, do we want to see or do we not want to see these platoons forming? This is the opposite direction. Here also we see we have a very dense platoon forming here at the beginning. And then it stays dense. And also when you look at the waiting times, there is waiting going on here. Although it's already green, that is due to the fact that there are that these platoons here have formed a queue of waiting vehicles. So when you look at this, you have to read it a little bit differently. It's not necessarily a car starting here, going all the way through without stopping, like the other, or the old way of showing this was suggesting. It is showing us where is their density forming, and we can follow back these lines to where it actually comes from. And maybe by moving around our offsets, we can find a way where the density is more equally spread around what we are seeing here. So this about this new feature of displaying platoons, of taking them into account. Of course, now that we have this information about the density, about where is the waiting time really forming and taking into account all the secondary directions, what we also did is we did an overhaul to our optimization process. So before we were using a method called the dominance process, I think, where you chose one dominant direction and would basically just do a very simple coordination with that and see how you could fit in the opposing direction. Now, with this approach, what we are looking for is we can still decide, do I want to prefer one direction or the other or both? But then we are looking more closely into the actual green times and the actual things going on behind the scenes. And we have implemented an actual optimization algorithm that, if you know a bit about math, you will know it is not the absolute optimum result, because this is a complex and exponentially growing mathematical problem, but it will at least find the one or the other local optimum a local optimal solution to the problem that we're having here. How does this work? What has changed? First of all, if we're looking at an optimization that is being made, or also at these platoons, for these platoons to show up, what we have to do is come up with a flow, or choose a flow. Wait, I have to move over here, this little dialog that is on my other screen. This is where I choose the flow. How do I come up with the flow? That is here. Okay. In this window, I have already created certain flows. If I go into detail, I want to show what's going on. Then I have here the it shows me how the flows deviate from the original flows at the single intersections. To show you what I mean, I might create a new flow. So we are opening this dialog where that happens. So it's a new flow. And now I have to, I have certain, on every intersection, I can choose from all the flows that I have entered there. And what Lisa will do for me, you might know if you have countings from 6 intersections, they will not fit perfectly to one another. You will have 1,000 vehicles leaving one intersection and 950 vehicles arriving at the next one, even though they have been counted at the exact same time of day. And what we have to do here is we have to tell Lisa which of the intersections shall be the benchmark. So one of them will be the one where we guarantee that in the main direction or in the opposite direction, we have exactly the flow that is in this counting data that we're giving here as a reference. And we can choose this fixed value for both the direction of travel and the opposite direction. And what Lisa is showing here in these diagrams, when you get your version of 7.3, you can look into it more detailed. It is showing me how much did it have to wiggle around or change the values to actually make them fit with one another. So here I see we have in the direction of travel, if I use the this intersection as the example intersection as my benchmark, and for the direction of travel, and the intersection 1983 as a benchmark for the opposite direction, then this will cause the least deviation all over the network. But I can also go then and say, I don't know, I like more this counting of the 667 because that's from last week and everything else is from 5 years ago. So let's take these values, and you see that for the several intersections, there is a certain percentage of change to the flows that had to be made so it all fits together. So this is also a new feature where you can really in detail choose how do I want to fit together my countings and have a total control over how much change did Lisa actually had to do to make it all work. So once I've done that, then I have this new flow here. Well, and then it will fit these flows in depending on the signal groups that I have chosen here for any intersection. So yeah, that's the preparation you have to do. Put the secondary direction signal groups in, put the countings in, and then if we start a new optimization, we just have to choose what flow to take. I will choose the morning flow for a new optimization, and there we have can choose an evaluation criteria. All these 3 criteria, they don't change the actual search algorithm. They just change by which criteria the outcome will be evaluated. So it knows rather change this, or I rather take this solution and go further from there because it has a good waiting time overall. Or you say, I like the performance index more because I don't want to know only if they are waiting. I also want to know how many cars actually had to decelerate, accelerate, and how much more energy would have been consumed. Or you can take the coordination criterion because you're a big fan of the German roadside manual, and that is what your way to go. I would suggest the performance index. And now we can say, what do we actually want to optimize? Direction of travel, opposing direction of both directions. And yeah, let's go for both directions. Why not? Make everyone happy. And now the optimization attempts. This is the big number. Depending on how much time you have in preparation for this webcast, I experimented a bit and put it into values between 25 and 250. If we would put it to 250, we would probably have to wait for about 5 minutes for the outcome for the result to be presented. If you have a night to spend and say, hey, look, the more attempts, the better, the more optimal my result, you can put in a 2000. It would just take a bit longer to get to the result, but maybe a good chance to do this overnight. So, but to show you something, I will leave it at 250. Now, what else can I do? I can choose one of these time distance diagrams as a starting solution. So solutions might be somewhere in the ballpark of what I've already chosen here. And what I also can do, I can yeah, either I use time distance diagram 1 or not. If I uncheck this box, it will not be based on this. If I check it, it will be based on this as a starting solution. If I know intersection 44 is off limits, I cannot touch it. It's not even part of my jurisdiction, whatever. There is nothing we can do about it. It has to stay fixed. Then I can set a minimum, maximum green time beginning there, and thus limiting the offset, and nothing here will be optimized. Or I put it to the cycle time and then I say it's free to go. Let's leave it freely and see what it comes up with. So now this is the point where we look at the bar, wait for it. Maybe for me, the chance to ask Mayuk, have there been any questions so far that we should answer?
No, not as of now. No questions.
Okay. So what this algorithm does, it's more or less randomly picking solutions, possible solutions, then comparing them with one another, and those who are good will be used to do something that's called a downhill optimization, and going from there. So and then finding a direction where the algorithm finds if I change this parameter in that direction, it becomes better. So I rather try that. That's the very short form of a rather complex mathematical algorithm that I must admit I have not fully understood. But what you have to take away of it, it will find a solution that is good, that is better than a lot of solutions. To let it find the optimum, we have to make to leave the number of attempts rather high. But it also depends on the complexity of a problem. If we have a rather under-complex and small coordination, we won't need so many attempts to find the real optimum, because it's, yeah, the simpler the problem, the less likely it is that we find a solution that is not optimal. Okay, here we have our result. So the performance index 18.9, waiting time 3.5. There before I have made some other attempts where I was coming to a waiting time of 5.1. I think here I used a starting point. Here we have a waiting time of 4.2. So far, this is the best solution we have found. And now we can see what it's doing by looking at the platoons. And if we just want to see, okay, what have you come up with? What would have been your solution? So you can see the further down the road we go, the more we're actually not coordinating towards the first platoon anymore, because what is also clear, the further down the road we go, the more traffic has actually built up from the side roads and needs to be dealt with before that. So this kind of falling coordination towards the end is something, my first impression of what this algorithm is giving us as a new idea, maybe, rather than just saying, okay, if I start here at second 27, I want to reach the end here, and I will not stop on the way there, which is maybe not really realistic when you take into account that there's also maybe heavy traffic coming from the side roads. Okay. I think the idea was that we would do about 45 minutes showing you the new features and then leave 15 to 20 minutes for discussion or for questions. So I think I have explained everything I know so far. So this feature, as new as it is, also for me, is still there's still a lot of room for experimentation and for getting to know with it, getting to know its nooks and crannies and how it actually works. So, but from what I'm seeing, and as you can tell, I'm an inexperienced user, 13 years in Schlottau and Bauer. This is one of the big innovations that I'm really excited to see, especially looking at these platoons and how they form, and really have an idea what's happening inside the coordination and outside the main corridor. Okay, so
Okay.
thanks to everyone who joined. I hope you, yeah, thank you for your attention, and see you in one of our next events. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Mayuk.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Torben.
all.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.